In 1974, a group of ordinary farmers from the village of Xiang, digging a well in Lintong County in China's Shaanxi province, had no idea they were about to stumble onto one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Beneath a thick layer of dense clay soil, the faces of ancient warriors stared back up at them. These were not isolated statues. They were fragments of a colossal underground army, built more than 2,000 years earlier to guard the first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, into the afterlife. The man who made the discovery was a farmer named Yang Jifa, working alongside several relatives and neighbors during a severe drought that had forced the village to dig deeper than usual in search of water. A few meters down, their shovels struck something hard and unexpectedly smooth. Fragments of fired clay, followed by what looked, unmistakably, like a human head. Local officials were called in, and word eventually reached professional archaeologists in Xi'an. Within weeks, what had looked like an unlucky well site had been recognized as the edge of an entire buried military formation, one that had lain undisturbed and almost completely unknown for over 2,000 years. Yang Jifa spent much of the rest of his life connected to the site he had accidentally unearthed, eventually working there and, for years, signing books for visitors who came from around the world to see what his family's well digging had brought to light. The Terracotta Army is not simply a monument to ancient Chinese art and engineering. It is the physical expression of one man's ambition, his fear of death, and his philosophy of absolute power. A man who redrew the map of East Asia for the first time in history and laid the foundations of an empire that, in one form or another, endured into the 20th century. The man behind the mausoleum, an emperor's fear of death. To understand the scale and purpose of the Terracotta Army, it helps to understand the man it was built to protect. Yingzheng ascended to the throne of the state of Qin in 246 BCE, at just 13 years old. China at that time was locked in the Warring States period, an era of relentless bloodshed, shifting alliances, and political instability that had ground on for generations. Driven by an unbending will and a rigid personality, and guided by legalist philosophy, a doctrine built around strict law and the absolute authority of the ruler, Yingzheng spent 2 decades conquering and absorbing 6 rival kingdoms: Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi. By 221 BCE, unification was complete, and Yingzheng adopted a title never before used in Chinese history, Qin Shi Huang, the first sacred emperor of Qin. His reforms were sweeping and often brutal. He forced through a single unified system of writing, currency, weights, measures, and even cart axle widths across the newly conquered territories. He launched massive infrastructure projects, building roads and canals and beginning the earliest sections of what would eventually become the Great Wall. And he tightened ideological control with a heavy hand, ordering thousands of books burned and, according to traditional accounts, having hundreds of Confucian scholars buried alive for criticizing his rule. Yet as his power grew closer to absolute, so did his fear of the one thing he could not conquer, death itself. The emperor became consumed by the search for an elixir of immortality. He sent expeditions out across the eastern sea in search of mythical islands said to hold the secret, and he took remedies laced with lethal doses of mercury in the hope they would extend his life. At the very same time, he was preparing an afterlife refuge on a scale that had no precedent anywhere in human history. Construction of his mausoleum began almost as soon as he took the throne of Qin and continued for roughly 38 years. According to the great historian Sima Qian, more than 700,000 people, craftsmen, farmers, soldiers, and convicts sentenced to forced labor, were put to work on the project over its lifetime. The architecture of the mausoleum and its underground pits. The necropolis of Qin Shi Huang is, in effect, an entire underground city, laid out as a mirror image of Xianyang, the imperial capital. At the heart of the complex rises a great earthen mound, beneath which sits the emperor's central tomb, a chamber that has never been opened. The Terracotta Army stands roughly a mile and a half east of that mound, and its placement was no accident. East was considered the most dangerous direction in Chinese cosmology, the direction from which the vengeful spirits of the 6 conquered kingdoms were thought most likely to come. Archaeologists have so far identified and excavated 4 major pits at the site. Pit 1 is the largest and most striking, stretching roughly 230 meters long and 62 meters wide. 11 parallel corridors run its length, paved with ceramic brick and originally roofed over with massive wooden beams, and together they hold more than 6,000 warrior and horse figures. Forward ranks of vanguard infantry and crossbowmen stand at the front, followed by disciplined rows of heavy infantry, with flanking guards positioned along the sides and rear. War chariots, each drawn by a team of 4 clay horses, occupy the center of the formation. A layout that faithfully reproduces the actual battle order of the Qin army as it would have arrayed before combat. Pit 2 represents a more complex, specialized fighting force, holding roughly 1,400 warriors and horses organized into 4 distinct units. There is a unit of crossbowmen and archers, including rare figures shown standing and kneeling in firing positions, a unit of heavy war chariots serving as the striking force. A mixed unit of infantry and chariots built for mobile combat, and a cavalry unit, the earliest large armored cavalry formation known anywhere in Chinese history, its riders standing beside their mounts. Pit 3, the smallest of the excavated sites at roughly 500 square meters, holds only 68 figures, a single war chariot, and a cluster of high-ranking officers. The absence of a clear battle formation here, combined with the presence of ceremonial weaponry, points strongly toward this being a command headquarters, the general staff of the underground army rather than a fighting unit itself. Pit 4, by contrast, was found completely empty. Construction here was abandoned outright, interrupted by the rebellions that broke out after Qin Shi Huang's death and that ultimately brought down the entire Qin dynasty. How the statues were made, and what makes them unique. The single most remarkable revelation about the terracotta army is this: among the thousands of figures unearthed so far, no 2 faces are exactly alike. Every statue carries its own distinct facial features, hairstyle, expression, and armor details, reflecting the genuinely multi-ethnic makeup of the empire. Individual figures show recognizable regional and ethnic characteristics drawn from across the many territories Qin Shi Huang had conquered and absorbed. Producing full-scale statues on this scale, the warriors average between roughly 1.8 and 1.95 meters in height, notably taller than the average person of the era, demanded something close to an industrial production line, run with remarkably strict quality control. The legs of each figure were formed from solid, densely packed clay strong enough to bear the statue's considerable weight, somewhere between 130 and 200 kilograms per figure, while the torso was built hollow, using a coiled clay method built up in layers. Heads, hands, and armor components were cast separately in molds and then attached to the finished torso. Only after this modular assembly was complete did master sculptors apply a thin layer of wet clay over the surface and hand-carve each figure's unique features: mustaches, beards, wrinkles, the folds of clothing, belts, and the individual rivets on each suit of armor. The finished statues were fired in dedicated kilns at temperatures between roughly 900 and 1000 degrees Celsius, a genuinely demanding process, since uneven heating could easily crack a piece this large. Each figure was stamped with the name of the craftsman or workshop responsible for it, a quality control measure with teeth, since a defective piece could bring severe punishment down on the workshop responsible, in some cases even execution. The original appearance, an explosion of color. Visitors to the museum today see rows of warriors in uniform shades of gray and earthen clay. Originally, though, the terracotta army was extraordinarily vivid and colorful. After firing, each statue was coated in a layer of lacquer drawn from the sap of the lacquer tree, and then painted in rich mineral pigments, cinnabar and red lead for the bright red of the tunics, azurite and malachite for the blues and greens found across the armor, orpiment for touches of yellow, and a synthetic pigment known today as Chinese purple. A barium copper silicate compound that ancient chemists had somehow learned to manufacture artificially, centuries before anything resembling modern chemistry existed. Tragically, that lacquer layer, preserved for more than 20 centuries in a sealed, oxygen-free underground environment, reacts almost instantly on contact with modern air. It dehydrates, curls, and flakes away, taking the paint with it, in as little as 3 to 5 minutes after excavation. Today, international teams of conservators use specialized chemical treatments based on polyethylene glycol to stabilize the original pigment directly at the excavation site, in the brief window before it would otherwise be lost forever. Hierarchy, weapons, and military organization. The Terracotta Army is an extraordinarily rich source of information about Qin-era military life, and archaeologists can read military rank directly from clothing, hairstyle, and armor. Ordinary infantrymen wear simple tunics, with little or no armor, or at most a light breastplate, and their hair is tied back in a plain knot. They carry spears, pikes, and bows. Junior officers wear armor that protects the shoulders, along with more elaborate hairstyles bound with ribbons, and carry swords and the distinctive dagger axe known as the GE. The most senior generals stand out clearly, wearing double-layered breastplate armor decorated with ornate bows and tassels, topped with elaborate headwear, and carrying bronze swords and ceremonial weapons that mark their rank. Cavalrymen wear close-fitting short jackets, soft caps tied beneath the chin, and boots, and are shown holding bows, short swords, and the reins of their mounts. The warriors were originally equipped with genuine, fully functional weapons forged from high-quality bronze. Bronze swords found at the site run up to 90 centimeters long and combine remarkable strength with flexibility. For decades, a popular story held that these blades survived more than 2,000 years without corroding because they had been deliberately coated in a protective layer of chromium oxide. A treatment that, if true, would have predated any known Western use of chromium plating by well over 2,000 years. More recent materials analysis, however, has cast serious doubt on that theory. Researchers now believe the trace chromium detected on many blades most likely came from residue left behind by the lacquer once applied to the wooden weapon handles and scabbards, rather than from any deliberate anti-corrosion treatment of the bronze itself, and that the sword's remarkable preservation instead owes more to the slightly alkaline chemistry of the surrounding burial soil and to the low tin bronze alloy the smiths were already using. The blades are still an impressive feat of ancient metallurgy, just not, it now appears, for quite the reason long assumed. The crossbows found throughout the pits use trigger mechanisms built from standardized, interchangeable parts, evidence of a genuinely advanced level of manufacturing organization, while their arrowheads were cast from lead-heavy alloys chosen specifically to maximize their lethality on impact. Alongside these ranged weapons, soldiers also carried the dagger axe and long spears mounted on wooden shafts, weapons designed for both cutting and thrusting against enemy infantry and cavalry alike. Much of this weaponry, unfortunately, did not survive intact. Shortly after the emperor's death, rebel forces led by Xiang Yu broke into the underground galleries, stripped out the metal weapons they found, and set fire to the wooden roof beams overhead, collapsing large sections of the pits and contributing to the damage archaeologists are still working to repair today. The bronze chariots, a pinnacle of ancient Chinese engineering. In 1980, just 20 meters west of the burial mound, archaeologists uncovered two extraordinarily detailed bronze chariots, built at exactly half-life size. The find caused an immediate sensation among historians of ancient technology. Each chariot is drawn by a team of 4 bronze horses and driven by a bronze charioteer. The first chariot is an open vanguard vehicle, fitted with a large canopy, a shield, and a crossbow with arrows, evidently designed for reconnaissance and battlefield command. The second is a fully enclosed carriage, roofed in a shape resembling a turtle's shell and divided into 2 separate compartments, understood to represent the emperor's own traveling quarters. Its windows are fitted with sliding bronze panels, finely perforated to let a passenger see out while remaining completely invisible to anyone outside. Each chariot is built from more than 3,000 individual bronze, gold, and silver components. The harness work alone shows staggering precision, with chains built from impossibly tiny interlocking links and bridles inlaid with gold and silver detailing. Cultural, historical, and modern significance. The Terracotta Army fundamentally reshaped how historians understand ancient Chinese society and its level of technological development. It marks a genuine turning point away from human sacrifice. Earlier rulers, particularly during the Shang dynasty, had frequently buried servants, wives, and soldiers alive alongside a deceased ruler. Qin Shi Huang, for all his cruelty, replaced living people with exact clay likenesses instead, preserving that human labor and life for the state rather than sacrificing it outright. The find also stands as powerful evidence of just how far state-level standardization had already advanced in ancient China, centuries before anything comparable emerged in the industrializing West, a conclusion borne out repeatedly in the uniform construction of weapons and statue components alike. And because of the sheer individuality given to each face, the site functions almost as an anthropological archive, offering a genuine record of the physical variety and regional identity found across the different kingdoms of ancient China. In 1987, the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, together with the Terracotta Army, was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. Today, the museum complex in Xi'an receives thousands of visitors from around the world every single day. The mysteries still unsolved. Archaeological work at the site is far from finished. Less than 10% of the total necropolis has been excavated so far. The greatest remaining mystery is the burial mound itself, still sealing the emperor's central tomb. According to the chronicles of Sima Qian, the interior of that mound holds a vast ceremonial hall, its ceiling inlaid with precious stones arranged to mirror the constellations, and its floor built as a map of the empire, with the Yellow River and the Yangtze rendered in flowing, liquid mercury. Modern geophysical surveys and soil chemistry analysis conducted around the mound have, remarkably, confirmed abnormally high concentrations of mercury in the ground directly above where the tomb is believed to lie, lending real scientific weight to a detail that, for centuries, sounded like pure legend. Chinese authorities and the broader scientific community have deliberately chosen not to rush toward opening the tomb itself. The central obstacle is technological. There is currently no method that can guarantee the survival of organic material, textiles, lacquerwork, and painted surfaces once the seal of the burial chamber is broken and the interior is exposed to open air. For now, archaeologists have chosen to leave Qin Shi Huang's deepest secret for a future generation, and for tools that do not yet exist. The Terracotta Army remains an eternal, silent guardian, preserving across 2,000 years the spirit, the power, and the tragic grandeur of China's very first empire.